Hi, I'm Theresa Kulikowski-Gillespie, and today I wanted to talk about body image and how the practices of meditation and mindfulness can actually be very helpful with these types of issues. When I talk about body image, I'm thinking about one, just the dislike of one's body, and it kind of goes on a spectrum. Sometimes people may not be completely happy with their body, but it doesn't interfere with their day-to-day living, and maybe they put on a little bit of weight, but they don't hate themselves for it, all the way to the far end of the spectrum of body dysmorphic disorder and disordered eating, things like anorexia and bulimia, where it consumes your life, where you're so obsessed with the way that you look, and putting on a pound can ruin your week and your month and your year, and lead you to do extreme behaviors such as restricting what you eat, not eating anything, overexercising. Bulimia involves purging, and sometimes that purging is vomiting, sometimes that purging is overexercising. So when I'm talking about body image, I'm talking about, maybe the further end of the extreme of things that lead to disorder, or like a feeling of dis-ease, and it really impacts your day-to-day life. So my own story with these types of issues, it started when I was 12, and I read an article about one of my idols, Shannon Miller, and there was one little blurb in this article about how she watched her fat intake. And so, me being the kind of extremist that I was, I said, "Oh, okay, well Shannon Miller's doing that. I'm going to do that." And so I didn't eat really any fat. I decided that I was going to go on like a fat-free diet, and anything that had fat in it, I would try to avoid. And in those days, I was so ill-informed that I ate a ton of sugar and tons of carbohydrates, but I didn't eat any fat. In my mind, fat equaled bad. And so um, I was very malnourished. And of course, when you're 12 years old, you should be going through puberty. You should be eating a lot of healthy fats and protein. And at that age, I was probably eating no more than 5 or 10 grams of fat a day. And so it kind of started there, the obsession with fat. And at that point, I don't think I was as concerned about how my body looked. It was more the obsession with food. And then after I missed the Olympic team in 1996, I was 16 years old, and I went through a depression, and I put on some weight, and I think I maybe gained 10 pounds. And I competed in a meet maybe a year after the Olympic trials, and saw myself on TV and thought, my God, I look so fat, and that was a trigger for me to start watching calories. So it then became, no longer really an obsession with fat, but an obsession with calories and needing to lose weight. And I began exercising in a way that didn't really support my gymnastics. So I was doing much more aerobic and endurance activity with the primary goal of losing weight. And I did. I lost a lot of weight, and I looked lean and fit, and I got a lot of compliments from people like, "Oh, you look great. You look awesome." But deep inside, I was really suffering, and I was controlled by food and exercise. So this started when I was 16 or 17, I guess. And it continued, and it kind of went through peaks and valleys. And um, when I decided to go off to the University of Utah for college gymnastics, my first semester in my freshman year, I fell into a pattern of kind of binging and then over restricting. And so it became a bit of a different battle, more along the lines of bulimia, but it was still the same level of obsession. And so it didn't, fortunately, it didn't interfere with my ability to have a successful freshman year, because once I started competing and I had something else to shoot for, the food issues were still super strict, but they weren't quite as unhealthy as they were before. But then, it just became it was really an obsession, and it controlled my life in so many ways. I mean, I recorded every single thing that I ate, and made sure that I wasn't overeating, and, at times making sure I wasn't undereating, but it was still that obsession with food and how my body looked. And if my clothes felt a little tight, it just ruined my day. And so, this continued to kind of haunt me throughout my college career. And by my last year of collegiate gymnastics, I was just full on bulimic, basically, with really bad binging episodes. And then the purging was more heavily restricting, maybe not eating the next day, drinking a lot of diet soda, and over exercising. And so obviously this didn't support health, and it didn't support high performance. And basically my body just completely burnt out that last year. And my last year of collegiate gymnastics, I would say it was like a year from hell, because my body just shut down, and they found a tumor on my spinal cord. And yet I continued to try to train as I was undergoing lumbar punctures and workups for multiple sclerosis. And I was still trying to focus on gymnastics in school. And so I think my coping mechanism was just to cling more tightly to food. And it became all consuming. And, then when I was done with gymnastics, again, it got really bad, and the depression was severe, and so much of it was wrapped up around losing my identity as a gymnast. And I wasn't fit. I mean, I was fit, but compared to what I was in college, I wasn't fit anymore. I wasn't lean and trim. And so I've personally had that struggle, and it kind of continued to be with me for years following my gymnastics career. And when I was finished with my physician assistant schooling, I started dabbling a little bit more in meditation and mindfulness, and I adopted a practice called the body scan, which is basically, a head to toe scan of your body, where you're really just connecting with how does my body feel in this moment? And you're not judging it, you're not trying to fix it or change it. It's just really reconnecting with what's called a felt sense in the body. So, can I actually feel what's going on in my body without having to perfect it or judge it or criticize it in any way? So, this was kind of a shift. I started relating to my body in a different way. And, fast forward a few years after that, I started getting into more of the meditation practices, and adopted a couple of teachers, Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach. Read a lot of their books, and I signed up for their courses, and I just really kind of threw myself into these practices. And one of the classes that I was taking with Jack Kornfield allowed a question and answer. You could call in on these live calls and ask a question. And so my question was picked, and so I was super excited to hear what he had to say. And my question was, I've lived with disordered eating and body image issues for over half of my life, and how can these practices support healing from that? And his recommendation was to try this particular practice called metta. It actually translates as loving kindness, and to practice this particular type of meditation every day for the next year. And this particular type of practice, it is a meditation, and it's basically based in love and sending well wishes to yourself, and then, ultimately sending it to the world. But his recommendation was to just do loving kindness for myself for a year. And I did, and it definitely shifted things, to at first, it feels mechanical, and it feels kind of forced, like, oh, may I be happy, may I be healthy. These at first maybe the words don't feel authentic, but with time, the more I practiced it, the more I was able to have moments where I actually felt some care and kindness towards my body, which was something that I had lost very early in life. Instead of caring and being concerned about my body, it was more, what can my body do? Can I push it a little further? What does it look like? It became a very, very hypercritical relationship with my body. And so this started to shift that. And it continues to be a practice that I utilize to this day. If there are days when I feel hypercritical of my body because I can't exercise, I can't do the things that I really love to do because I'm living with an ongoing illness, this practice is kind of my fallback. This is my go-to, that I know that I can utilize this tool and kind of say, okay, pause. That programming, which is what it was a programming, is in the past, and I don't have to buy into that anymore. I don't have to be so critical of my body. I know that it's doing the best that it can with what it has, and it's been through a lot. So I'm able to the best of my ability in those moments, even very briefly, do a loving kindness practice. Or if I feel like I need it more deeply, I'll actually make it into a more formal meditation, where I'm sitting down. I take 15 or 20 minutes to go through the whole loving kindness practice. And so I'm sharing this today because I don't know what the gymnastics world is like anymore. I don't know how many athletes or how many, just people in general are struggling with body image issues. But part of me feels like it could potentially get worse now because of the fact that people are out in the media so much more, via social media. I follow a lot of the gymnastics pages, and I see a lot of these young gymnasts, making sure that they're posing in a particular way so their body looks thin, or that their muscles are showing, and so I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that it's not as big of an issue as it used to be within the gymnastics world, and within, primarily female athletics, but it's not limited to women. It's everybody experiences this dissatisfaction with their body in one way or another. It's just, I think, a matter of how extreme it becomes. So yeah, so I'm hoping that the younger generations do have tools to have a healthy relationship with their bodies, that it's not something that they abuse and ignore and criticize and have to perfect all the time. So these tools, the practice of mindfulness, in my own experience, I started with just that pure mindfulness practice of a body scan, of reconnecting with my body without all the judgment, without all the criticism, without needing to perfect it in any way. So that was just a pure mindfulness practice, being with my body without judging it. And then it kind of began to build into what are called cultivation practices. So the mindfulness is purely being with what is, not having to change it, refraining from judgment. And then cultivation is you're intentionally trying to create something different. And so I think in order to use those cultivation practices skillfully, there has to be a foundation of mindfulness. You have to have an awareness of your actual experience in this moment without having to fix it. And then you can intentionally and gently bring about something new. And so that's what the loving kindness practice has been for me, is intentionally bringing well wishes to myself, and then ultimately well wishes to all beings everywhere. That one of the common loving kindness phrases is, may I be healthy. Another one is, may I be happy. May I be held in loving kindness. And when you start to kind of repeat these words within meditation, at first they feel a little superficial, but then you actually start to feel it, like that you want happiness for yourself, that you want happiness for other people. And I think these practices can be life-changing. They were for me, and I hope they can be for others. And right now, I'm focused on the military population as I write my book, Beyond the Battlefield, in hopes of making meditation and mindfulness more accessible. And I also really want to focus on athletes. But again, I mean, these are human practices. Their intention is to reduce human suffering. And So I hope as many people as possible can have access to something like meditation and mindfulness and loving kindness, because I think the world could definitely benefit from more of that. Thanks.